I'd like to talk about India's unusual and unnatural dependency on China for bulk drugs and drug intermediates. This question has assumed heightened significance after the COVID pandemic. Is India the pharmacy of the world? And what is the nature of this Chinese threat to the Indian pharma industry? Indian pharma is indeed very big. It's the third largest pharmaceutical industry in the world, with overall revenues of about 375,000 crores. This is slightly less than our defense budget and very much more than, say, our education budget, which is only 100,000 crores per year. By comparison, our entire budget for the three science departments is only about 16,000 crores. So it's only about less than 4% of this whole thing for the pharma. So it is a very, very big industry. And when I give you the breakup of this industry, you will realize immediately the inherent weakness. Of this 375,000 crores, about three-fourths of it is for what is called formulations, and only one-fourth is based on manufacture. Now, manufacture should actually be the backbone of any pharma industry. Formulations are an added extra. Now, what is formulation? Formulations is the process where you take the drug itself, the chemical, which is called in technical language active pharmaceutical ingredient or API, and then you take the actual chemical and then make it in the form of, say, tablets, injections, ointments, suspensions, syrups, and so on, which is the form in which these drugs are ingested or given. Now, formulations is fine. I mean, India has become a world leader at formulations. And this is fine. There is nothing wrong in it, but for the dependence to be 75% on just formulations is unsafe and unwise, because if your supply of the raw material is choked off for any reason, then your formulations expertise is not going to do you any good. And this is the danger, the present danger that India faces. Now, as far as the dependence on China is concerned, it is indeed very high. For example, we account for just 6% of Chinese exports in this sector, which means they don't really need our business. On the other hand, we get 75% of our imports from China. So we need them a lot, but they don't need us hardly anything at all. So we should not hype ourselves up too much. This is not a commercial transaction between two equals. It's a very unequal kind of a balance sheet here. Now, it is quite useful to try to understand why we got to this particular stage. And it turns out that we got here not because of, really any one bad decision or one bad event or one bad circumstance which was out of our control. But we got here over a period of 50 years actually, because my story starts around 1970, because of a series of decisions that were made by the government. And believe me, not all these decisions were bad decisions. Those decisions that were taken from 1970 onwards with regards to the pharmaceutical industry, some of them, or even most of them, might have been correct decisions for the time, for the circumstances. But somehow, when you put the whole thing together, you realize that the overall consequence was very unfortunate for our country. So, this is a strange situation where a series of things that were not so good or not so bad, when put together, have given rise to a result that is really quite bad for our country today. Let me not underestimate the magnitude of the Chinese threat today to the Indian pharmaceutical industry. What happened in 1970? In 1970, this country lacked most things. The economy was very poor. We didn't have hardly anything. Why just drugs? And at that stage, Mrs. Gandhi, the then Prime Minister, realized that not being able to buy drugs and not being able to make them was going to put the country in a very bad shape. So, what she did, or what her government did in 1970, was to scrap the old Indian Patents and Designs Act 1911, and we have a new Patents Act 1970. And the main recommendation of this new Patent Act 1970 is that it effectively took India out of the international forum as regards drug patents. You see, patents on drugs are typically of two types: product patents and process patents. Most of the money and most of the protection comes in the product patents. So, in other words, the person who has discovered a new drug, discovered from scratch, that party gets the maximum patent protection in a product patent. A process patent, on the other hand, refers to the way in which this product is made. And if you think a little bit about it, you will realize that you may have a very good process patent, but ultimately, if you are making the same product which has a product patent, this process patent is not going to take you very far. You might make it in a different way, and that is patentable. But what you make in the end is what is already protected, and so you can't make it and you cannot sell it, because that is the main idea of a patent. So, what the Indian Patent Act 1970 said is that we don't follow product patents anymore from outside India, and we can make our own process patents. In other words, we can take any drug in the world we want, patented or not, and we can make it in some different way, and then that's good enough to make and sell in India. So we can't sell these things outside India, but we can make it and sell it in India, which was at that time the main problem. Import substitution was a must. Eventually, this relaxed, or not even eventually, quite quickly it relaxed to the stage when Indian pharma was simply making anything and everything, patented or not, sometimes even following the same process. So they were violating not only the product but also the process, and they were making everything. Now, what is the positive side of all this? Positive side is that our expertise in synthetic chemistry really grew by leaps and bounds. And the origin of this technical advance came, I would say, from typically the public sector or the government institutions. The Indian Institute of Chemical Technology, in those days called RRL Hyderabad, National Chemical Laboratory, Pune, Indian Institute of Integrative Medicine, in those days called RRL Jammu, IDPL, Indian Drugs and Pharmaceuticals Limited, a public sector company in Hyderabad, were the leaders in innovation, new chemistries, and Indian the chemists became wizards at making just about any drug. This was the high noon of the old regime where we were doing very well. Not only were we able to make them very easily, we were also able to sell them very cheap. So the prices of Indian drugs then and even today in India are among the lowest in the world. This is something that we all know. So this went on for several years. And in 1984, of course, Mrs. Gandhi was killed. And we had a new regime with her son. And it was at about that time when it was realized that India had to come back into the Committee of Nations as regards patents, the WTO, but also about many other things. India was opening up in terms of computers, infrastructures, and it was realized somehow, although the full magnitude of the crisis only came in 1991, but it was realized that our economy was now going nowhere with the old socialistic pattern. So at about that time, Rajiv Gandhi started changing some of the rules, and gradually it was felt that we had to obey the patents issued in other countries. Now, this process took about 10 years. By 1995, the die was cast when we accepted the policies of the World Trade Organization, WTO, and we accepted what is called the trade related aspects of intellectual property rights, or TRIPS. Now, according to TRIPS, now we have to adhere to the patent rules and regulations that are used throughout the world. Product patents from America and other places have to be obeyed. The process patents could be there, but as I've already told you, there is not much fun in having a process patent if you don't have the product patent. And India has hardly any product patents. This is another thing I should tell you. We lack the research expertise, and mostly we lack the money to be able to develop a new drug from scratch. This was true then, it is true today. Okay, so let's not kid ourselves about India designing, lots of new drugs and so on. We manufacture many drugs. Manufacturing is not even the same as making, and making is not the same as designing. These words are all very important in science. Today I find that a lot of confusion with the use of these words in the public media, television, Twitter, all these places by politicians. So it's very important that we keep the correct meaning of the word. Make, manufacture, design. They are all very different. Today we cannot design anything. We can make a few things. We manufacture many things. So let's, in all this talk of Atmanirbhar and so on, let's keep some of these basic things in mind. So yes, we accepted TRIPS, and we went along. And at the same time, several faulty decisions now from the government. They allowed scientists from government labs to start setting up their own companies. But then that is fine. That is a good decision. But at the same time, they saw to it that when the lab got revenues from these private companies for contracts or for research, the mode of division of these profits by the working scientists was very, very small. So you do all the work in the name of the lab, and then you get a lot of money, and then the scientist gets very little in his or her hands. So then the inevitable happens. The work is done in the government lab, but it is shown as happening in the private company outside. And so as a result, this leads to a hemorrhaging not only of money, but also of skills and IP, intellectual property. So at about the same time, the rules and regulations to start new companies were so restrictive then. And this is one of the bad things that started happening. Some of the Indian private players who are already attracting talent from the government labs, mind you. They, as I said, the origin of any kind of good research and technical know-how in the Indian pharma industry has always been our public sector institutions. So make no mistake about this. It has only come from the public sector institutions. These scientists in the public sector labs started going to private industries, and then the worst happened. The private industry started moving their manufacture to China. This is how China came into the picture. And they took with them not only their know-how, but then the nature of China being what it is, the Chinese rapidly gobbled all this know-how and then started setting up the things themselves. So now we come straight into what is called the Chinese threat. Now most of our drugs and bulk intermediates, they are made by what is called a multi-step sequence. So you have a very simple compound called A, shall we say. A is converted into a slightly more complicated compound B. So apparently B will be costlier than A. Should be, no? And then B is then converted into something slightly more complicated. We'll call it C. So C should be costlier than B, which is costlier than A. And typically we have 3 or 4 step sequences. So you can go from A to B to C to D to E. So one would think that A would be the cheapest of these and E would be the costliest, E being the final drug. But no, the Chinese didn't do this. What they would do is they would, for example, take A to B. They would make B more expensive than A. Whereas B is actually, they would make B cheaper than A. The B is actually more expensive than A, they made it cheaper. So if you make B very cheap, there is no incentive for anyone in India to develop the A to B process, because this is going against logic almost. The product of a reaction is made cheaper than the starting material. So the A to B route is out. And then when people are thoroughly used to that, what they will then do is make B very costly and make C cheap. Okay, now you get the idea. So then what happens? There is no incentive to develop the B to C route. So they've already cornered A, B, and C, and so on and so on. So that in the end, only E, the final product, the final drug, is very, very cheap. And A, B, C, D are all made very costly. So in other words, the other countries, say India, has no incentive at all to make any of these drugs. We are forced to buy, which is what has happened. Now, this is dubious price changes. Sometimes Chinese drugs also become more expensive because of genuine reasons. One of the things that's been happening in the last 20 years is that China has become much more aware of pollution, anti-pollution regulations and so on. So because of this, the price of some of these things does go up. Now, why are the Chinese able to make these drugs so cheap? The reason again is coming back to this A, B, C, D, E thing. The Chinese manufacturers control the entire process from A to E. And they also make these drugs in very large amounts. So as a result, they are able to drastically cut costs. About the only thing that is costlier in China is labor compared to India. And here the government steps in handsomely and then subsidizes the labor there. The main advantage that Chinese have is their raw materials, that is these A compounds, are extremely cheap compared to India. This is because of nature's bounty and also because of the very large amounts of money that China started getting in the early 2000s. As a result, it could corner and buy lots of raw materials very cheap. It can almost control the price of these raw materials. Now, sum and substance of all this, I think you got the general picture, is that some very, very, very common compounds which are sold as drugs in India are all imported from China, or at the maximum we are doing the last step, D to E step we are doing in India. The rest of it is imported. Now this includes some very common things. I mean, paracetamol, which all of us take as crocin, aspirin, salicylic acid. Aspirin is an acetyl derivative of salicylic acid, and it's a medicine that has been known to humankind since the time of the Roman soldiers who first discovered this thing from the willow bark. And all our common medicines for cardiovascular diseases, neurological diseases, pulmonary diseases, metabolism diseases like diabetes, diseases of the central nervous system, common medicines, tetracycline, azithromycin, norfloxacin, vitamin B12, neomycin, metformin. I mean, you name it, we buy it from China. It's really very scary. And our major amount is bought from China. We have a capability of hardly making anything today. Most tragic are areas where we had a very sound expertise, which we have lost because of all this. All drugs related to fermentation. And now I'm talking about antibiotics. In the 1960s, India was one of the major places where penicillin G used to be made, the Hindustan Antibiotics Limited outside Pune. All that expertise has gone now. We are not able to do fermentation technology at a cost effective way. Now, so the sad story goes on. I think just giving more examples is just going to make you and me more depressed. In 2008, the government vaguely woke up. This was the time of Manmohan Singh government. There was a task force set up, and the task force did come up with some good recommendations. They said, for example, some of the infrastructural costs of producing bulk drugs at low prices are things that individual companies cannot bear. So they said we'll have clusters which will take care of common facilities, that is, like water, steam, nitrogen, gases that are required for the synthesis. And also at the testing stage, once the drug is made, to test the drugs properly so that they are clinically okay. They said all these things the government should start. The companies are responsible for their own research and development. So they don't share that knowledge with other companies, obviously. But they use the common facilities in the clusters and then pay the government royalty. It's a very good scheme. Also considering that the pharma industry in India is located only in 3 clusters. By far the biggest is the one around Hyderabad. The second may be the entire stretch between Pune, Mumbai and Ahmedabad. And the third one is near Delhi, Haryana, Punjab, etc., which is much smaller. Now, so the cluster idea was there. Then they wanted financial incentives from the government so that people, private sector could get into this. See, essentially the price of a Chinese import is about 10 to 30% less than what it costs to make it in India. It's not that we can't make it. It's just that in the present system of regulations, it is costlier to make it in India. That's why our private players don't get into it. So somewhere, somehow, in some form, either through tax incentives or through clusters or through different ways of providing the research easily to the companies, government has, that is direct or indirect, government has to make up this 10 to 30% shortfall. If it is able to do that, then I don't see anything difficult in Indian pharma quickly catching up. Now, this 2008 thing, nothing happened, sadly. Again, we don't know why nothing happened. By 2013, still in the Manmohan Singh era, a new committee was set up under one of the departmental secretaries called Mr. Katoch. So it is called in the jargon Katoch Committee of 2013. So essentially they said the same things all over again, and this time with more data, and they simply said that we are in a very bad shape. Our dependence on China is too much. And then what happened? They gave the report in 2015. Nothing happened. By 2017, the ministries were sending some vague notes to each other saying this is important, this is not important. We don't know. We don't know why nothing happened. People say it's because of the constant transfer of the concerned bureaucrats. In which case I would ask, why does so much depend on which particular bureaucrat sits on which particular chair? There are 3 relevant departments. The major culpability goes to the Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers, without a doubt, because pharma comes under them. But no less culpable are the Ministries of Science and Technology, and I would dare say the Ministry of Education, because as I've already told you, much of this good R&D is coming from was coming from education institutions. So the fact that it is not coming now, it means that Education Ministry has done something wrong in the fact that it is not really able to come out. So they just make lists, and say this drug is not there, that drug is not there, etc., etc. And really nothing happens after that. People don't know. Recently, there has also been some talk with the vaccine. Is that do the political opinions of the bureaucrats influence their decision making in any way? It's a very disturbing question. You could well have, senior bureaucrats of that age were probably recruited at the height of the socialistic pattern of society. One of them might well have said, "Oh, these private players are so rich, why do we give them more concessions?" Something like that. It could be. I mean, I don't know. I don't sit in these committees and I'm not privy to their decisions. But otherwise, there is no rational explanation for why things that were clearly understood and accepted way back, as far back as 2008, needed COVID to accelerate the whole thing. There's no explanation. And please remember once again, I folded hands, I tell you, this has nothing to do with BJP, Congress, etc. Nothing. Because this all these processes, decisions, they seem to have a life of their own and they move in their own way, irrespective of who is in power where. There are just too many rules, too many regulations. To start a company in China takes 6 months. To start a company in India takes 3 years. You've got to get as many certificates, land allotment certificate, permission for land use certificate from the state government, from the department, local, no objection certificate under Water and Air Pollution Act, approval of construction activity and building plan certificate, sanction of power certificate, boiler inspection certificate, finance certificate, GST, export and import certification certificate. So all these certificates have to be obtained with all probably the necessary, so many other informal arrangements have to be made before these certificates are given. So frankly speaking, the private player doesn't want to get into it. Well, anyway, to end the story, because I think I'm reaching the end of the time that I've been given, after COVID, suddenly the whole thing came into heightened importance. Government has, produced an emergency plan. I mean, yes, when the water comes up to here, then you're forced to do something. The same thing happened in 1991 in the financial sector. Same thing has happened to the pharma sector now. So they made some plan and they've given about 10,000 crores in order to start these clusters, to give some initiatives to people to develop R&D. And I don't want to be very rosy about all this. Our R&D in developing new drugs is non-existent. I mean, to give you an example, one third of all the marketed drugs today contain element called fluorine. Fluorine really, in terms of the pharma industry, should be declared as an essential element, a strategic element. And yet, in the length and breadth of this vast country, we don't have a single process to make any fluoro compound at an industrial level, except one or two small companies in Gujarat, to the best of my knowledge. So it's really shabby. One third of all the drugs sold today contain fluorine, and we don't know how to make fluorinated compounds in India. Okay, so we need to do a lot of research. Now, all this talk about Atmanirbhar and all is not going to get us anywhere because we have neglected all these areas. The present outlook is pretty gloomy. Whimsical bureaucrats, maybe well meaning politicians who are not briefed properly. As I said, Chemicals and Fertilizers Ministry, especially the Ministry of Science and Technology, and to some small extent the Ministry of Education. I think these three ministries should be really hauled up and be asked, why have you all not done anything for 12 years? I think up to 2008, one could say that we were a victim of circumstances and just good thinking. We took the best decisions based on the circumstances at that time. After 2008, there is no excuse. So, what we now need is the three C's We need chemistry, we need capital, and we need clusters. 3 C's: chemistry, capital, clusters. We have to have a proper means of getting money into the hands of the private players, because they don't do it for free. That socialistic pattern of society is gone. You may want to give the medicines to poor people, that's different, but you can't say that private sector will not be allowed to do this and that. Capital, that is the only. Chemistry, no, we don't have any now today. We have to start doing it. And then the clusters. The clusters are a must. Without that, we will never. China has clusters. They have 3 or 4 big clusters in their country. So this is the way I believe we should go. It is, anyway, for whatever it is worth, COVID has given us that necessary wake-up call. Let us see how we can go forward from here. I don't want to end the discussion on a very pessimistic note, but I would simply say that Prime Minister himself has said that we need to have a quantum jump in our thinking. The very thinking in the bureaucratic circles and the very thinking in some of these high scientific offices in Delhi has to change in a very fundamental manner. It cannot be more of the same. It cannot be incremental. It has to be non-linear. We have to do a big jump. And whenever you do, there's an old Russian saying that you can never cross a wide ditch with many jumps. You have to cross in a single jump. And this is what I believe we should do. Thing is not totally lost, but I want to leave you certainly with the definite feeling that unless we really work hard and work in totally different ways, this pharma problem is not going to get solved so easily. And as long as it doesn't get solved, my very last words to you are that China will be standing with a gun near our head, because tomorrow they can deny us extremely vital medicines. They don't need to sell to us, but today we desperately need to buy from them. This is not a very good situation for this country. Thank you very much indeed. I'd like to thank the Pondy Lit Fest for having asked me to share some of my thoughts, and I would welcome any feedback from people who listen to this talk for things of a more technical nature, which is impossible to cover in a talk like this. Thank you very much, everybody, once again.